David Power phoned me up and asked if I would be interested in writing a piece and could he come and see me. And I don't know how we ended up thinking of a concerto, but we got round to the idea of a concerto, which fortunately RTÉ also thought was an interesting idea. So I had some meetings with them and they came up with a commission for this piece. Well, David is an extraordinary player and he has a tremendous energy and a tremendous desire to learn new things and do different things and so on. I think without that, I probably wouldn't have been convinced to do this, because one thing that's always put me off writing anything for traditional music is the fact that traditional musicians don't normally use notation to learn a piece. And all of my work has been based on notation. I mean, I did some electronic stuff earlier, but really the main body of my work has all been about notation. So I was very concerned that how would I work with a musician who had learned the piece basically orally and from memory. There were several other problems. One was that it was for large orchestra and the pipes, so I was concerned about the balance, and we were also concerned about the tuning, because the pipes are not always in the same, as the pipes play, so the tuning shifts slightly. But these are all things that David managed to deal with, and has dealt with amazingly. But the other obvious thing was that the instrument has not been adapted or evolved in any way to fit the needs of Western classical music, not even earlier, much less 21st century. So it is still an unspoilt, if you like, unrenovated instrument, and perfectly adapted for traditional music, but with what we would consider in the modern orchestral world, say, as drawbacks. There's only one dynamic. It basically plays at one dynamic. It has a limited range, but certain notes in the extremities can only be reached in a certain kind of a way. You can't just write a top B because it won't sound. You have to approach the top B. And then there were all kinds of little quirks that I didn't know about, which came out in the process. The process being that I wrote first what I would like, and then was told what was possible or not. And there was quite a lot more not possible than I imagined. Well, the one thing I was absolutely clear about was that I didn't want to do a kind of tourist piece, so if you like. In other words, a traditional piece for the pipes with an attractive setting for orchestra. Sort of like a Hollywood thing. I didn't want to do anything that was in any way folksy. So I wanted to, at the same time, treat the instrument with respect also in respect of its tradition, but really with respect in the sense that I'm not patronizing in any way. So to sort of treat it as a viable opponent of the orchestra. But I felt I couldn't go too far in that direction, that I couldn't be too radical in my treatment of the instrument, because it is a national instrument and it's a treasure and it has a huge tradition, and I didn't want to completely ignore that. So I made some reference to a traditional piece, in fact David's version of a traditional piece, the weeping of the women at the slaughter, roughly Gol Na, which I thought had really beautiful lines in it. So I took one really, and modified it and treated it in different ways. But I felt it is a lyrical instrument, and maybe it should have some lyrical element to it, but it's a sixth of the piece, if that. And for quite a lot of the time, the instrument just plays one or two notes, actually. But I wanted to write a serious piece, I mean, for this instrument, and a serious concerto. It's not concerto in the sense of soloist versus orchestra in the romantic tradition, like the big piano concertos. I mean, this part is relatively restrained, but it is essential. I mean, you know, he doesn't play what anyone else plays. I mean, so the solo part has to be there, clearly audible. I mean, with every piece I try and do something different. So like the first piano concerto, for example, I made it so that the piano part is meaningless without the orchestral part, and the orchestral part is meaningless without the piano part. So they're kind of totally interlocked. Whereas, say, with the cello concerto, I wrote the entire cello solo part without any orchestra, and then cut it in half and then added orchestra to the solo part. This was, I don't know, I did sort of just start writing it and let it go where it took, you know, where the music took me. But because I was, you know, concerned about this kind of tradition, I do feel that the piece isn't quite as radical as it could have been. I mean, at the end of it, I sort of said, oh, I think I've written a 20th century piece rather than a 21st century piece. But that doesn't really bother me these days.